Will have already watched The Psychology of Evil by Philip Zimbardo, and then gone down and watched the 75th Precinct NYP Gangsta Cops, or the documentary The 7-5. And our goal here is to do a synthesis. Now, that word seems to scare people a little bit, but really what synthesis is you pretend you're Dr. Philip Zimbardo, you know him well enough, that you would pretend that you were him watching the film, and what would he say about the 7-5? So you can do either a video or a podcast, or you can do a blog or a written response. So I'm going to take you through the assignment and then how to do it if you chose to do the essay response. So what you do is you watch the TED Talk and then you watch the documentary. And while you're watching the TED Talk, you should be thinking about 5 or 6 quotes or things that Dr. Philip Zimbardo says that you can then apply to maybe 2 or 3 situations from the 7-5. So gather those quotes, and what I did is I included a couple of things below here. This one about good cops and bad cops, but also about the 7 social processes that grease the slippery slope of evil. So mindlessly taking the first step, dehumanization of others, and what a lot of students choose to focus on is what was Kenny or Mike's 15-volt moment if all evil starts at 15 volts. So use specific examples or quotes from the TED Talk and explain how he would respond to the 7-5. So take 2 or 3 events from the 7-5 and have Zimbardo comment on them, and then justify why you believe he would say that. So if you say he would be really interested in the time that Kenny takes the $100 bill from Mike, explain why Philip Zimbardo would be interested in that. When students are struggling, I say, well, here's some things that he might comment on. He might say, what made it possible for the corruption and evil to exist in the 7-5 in New York at that time? Maybe he would provide advice on what the New York City police should do to prevent corruption. He might suggest what made some police corrupt, and I would use specific examples of Mike or Chicky or Walter or Kenny. He could also reflect on a specific situation. Maybe it's when Mike takes the money from the Puerto Rican mystery car that he pulls over, or maybe it's when Mike starts going to those huge robberies where he's wearing a mask and he's beating up people. He might comment on Mike or Kenny's 15-volt moment, or the 7 social processes that grease the slippery slope of evil. So here's how you're going to be graded. Do you have an insightful understanding of both the text and the film, or in this case, both the films? And do you have a thesis? Have you argued that Dr. Philip Zimbardo would say this? Have you talked about both? Have you talked about both videos? Do you have pertinent references and quotes from both? Do you have incredibly detailed examples? Are you demonstrating a skillful understanding of language in your podcast or in your essay or in your video? It doesn't really have to be error-free, but what your spelling and grammar should be well done. And I've just noticed that there's this part 2, part 3 thing. Don't worry about those. Those will be deleted. They're not part of this assignment. So if you're struggling a bit with synthesis or how to write an essay or a paragraph is really like a hamburger. You have the bun at the top, which is your topic sentence or your thesis statement. What are you going to argue? And then a blueprint. What are you going to talk about? And I'm going to show you what that looks like in a moment in a student's essay. The meat is your paragraphs, the part of your podcast where you discuss your main points. You include quotations and insights and analysis and have maybe transition words. Your concluding sentence really sums up your points and makes an insightful comment. So if you've ever seen Modern Family, this is how an essay might go on Modern Family. Now, I'm not providing one on the 7-5 because I really don't want you guys to just copy what I put here. So here's my thesis. Jay, the patriarch on the television show Modern Family, is a domineering character. Right there, I know exactly what I'm going to talk about for this entire essay. It's that he's domineering. So then I'm going to have my blueprint. His actions, relationships with others, and his concluding statements demonstrate his oppressive nature. A blueprint is amazing for a teacher or for anybody that's reading your essay because it shows that you're able to organize your thinking. So we know that I'm going to talk about actions first. So if you look here, Jay's actions, such as telling Manny not to pursue his love, make him an authoritative character. So there's my statement. And then I have an example. He tells Manny that if he puts on a puffy white shirt and proposes love, he will swing on a flagpole by his puffy white underpants. So I provided a quote here as part of my example, which demonstrates that I have a superior understanding of this text. And then I analyze my quote and explain how it relates to the fact that Jay's authoritative. The fact that he will not support his stepson and even goes so far as to insult him shows that he is authoritative. Then we know that I'm going to talk about Jay's relationships with others and then eventually his concluding statements. So if you follow this format, you make a statement, then you provide an example, and then you have an explanation, you're going to do just fine on this particular paragraph. Okay? Let's take a look at a student example if you're still struggling a little bit here. So here is a student sample from my website. So here's a kiddo that has a very clear thesis. If Dr. Philip Zimbardo were to watch the film The 7-5, he would state that the film is an example of evil. I know exactly what this student's going to talk about. Dr. Philip Zimbardo would notice numerous different points in the film, and accordingly he would refer to the following 3 scenarios to prove his point. Kenny Urell's 15-volt moment, the bad barrel that permitted the NYPD corruption, and he would suggest that Mike Dowd illustrates the 7 steps that result in evil. So we know that this kid's going to talk about 3 different things. 1, Kenny Urell's 15-volt moment, then the bad barrel, and then he's going to talk about the 7 steps that grease the slippery slope to evil. He starts out with a great topic sentence. Dr. Philip Zimbardo makes a great statement by expressing his belief that every act of evil starts with 15 volts. That stems from the Milgram experiment. Kenny Urell had always believed that he was going to continue to be a good cop. Nevertheless, he was offered $100 of drug money by Mike Dowd, and he initially denied it. The $100 continued to break Kenny down mentally, and he continued to think about it and further buy into Mike's way of being a police officer after realizing that he could use the money. So here's his example from the text. It's got details. You may even want to provide a quote there. Then there's the analysis piece. The examples here, here's the explanation. Eventually, Kenny's 15-volt moment got the best of him, and he began going down the path of evil alongside Mike Dowd. Therefore, Dr. Philip Zimbardo's theory on how evil starts with only 15 volts is supported in the movie by Kenny experiencing a 15-volt moment and then spiraling downhill from there. That's excellent synthesis. Dr. Zimbardo, if he were to watch it, what would he say? The student has a clear understanding of both the film or both films, and he's got some analysis, and then eventually he goes on to create a conclusion that sums everything up. So if you're struggling a bit with this assignment, feel free to contact me on Teams, and I can take you through it. There are some examples that you'll see right here that I've put of student samples. If you're really having trouble with an introductory sentence, as a class one time, we put up our own introductory paragraph, and you're actually allowed to use this verbatim. So if you want to steal this, copy and paste it, that's okay, because that'll probably help you get going in either your podcast or your video or your essay. If you need any help, please contact me via Teams, via email, or on the Remind app. I'd love to help you. Good luck with this assignment.